I still remember that night like it was yesterday. I had barely stepped into my son's living room when the words I never thought I'd hear came screaming across the air. Apologize to my wife or get out of my house. My heart froze, and for a moment I couldn't even breathe. Every eye in the room was on me. Friends, neighbors, even family who had come over for dinner. My mind raced, trying to understand how it had all escalated to this moment. Was I really the villain in my own family's story? Tell me, if this were you, would you have stood there, trembling inside, or walked out in silent defeat? I had spent decades teaching my son what respect and compassion meant. I raised him to honor women, to cherish his partner, and to never let anger dictate his actions. And yet, there I was, being told by him, my own child, that I had crossed some invisible line. The worst part wasn't just the humiliation. It was the betrayal I felt in my bones. I had always tried to do right by everyone, my family, my friends, my community. I had worn my heart on my sleeve, even when it made me vulnerable. And now, suddenly, my son had turned into a judge I never asked for, and the courtroom was my own living room. It all started a few months earlier, when my son, Ryan, had introduced me to his wife, Alexis. She was a beautiful, poised woman with a calm smile and eyes that seemed to hide a storm I hadn't yet noticed. At first, I tried to be welcoming, to open my heart and embrace her as part of the family, but something didn't sit right. There were small things, little remarks that felt dismissive, subtle digs at the way I ran my home, the way I cooked, even the way I spoke. At first, I brushed them off, thinking I was being overly sensitive, imagining slights that didn't exist. But slowly, day by day, her tone and attitude chipped away at my patience. I felt invisible in my own home, a guest in my own family, and that realization hurt more than I could ever put into words. Then came the invitations. What should have been moments of bonding, family dinners, holiday gatherings, celebrations turned into minefields. Alexis had this uncanny ability to make everyone around her feel like they were doing something wrong. And I, unfortunately, was the easiest target. One evening, she criticized the way I had arranged the living room for a small dinner, claiming it was too old-fashioned and embarrassing for a modern family. I tried to respond politely, to explain that this was my home, my space, but the words caught in my throat when Ryan didn't defend me. He just looked at me, frowning slightly, as if I were the one in the wrong. The humiliation was sharp, like a knife twisting inside my chest, but I held my composure. After all, I told myself, I was the mother. I had to be stronger than that. Weeks passed, and the tension simmered, a quiet storm building beneath the surface. It escalated gradually. Alexis began to control more aspects of our interactions: who could visit, how long they could stay, even dictating what my son and I should discuss. She would whisper things to Ryan that I couldn't hear but could feel, the subtle shift in his tone, the way he no longer looked at me when she was around, the silent obedience that stung more than any words. And still, I tried to be patient. I told myself, she's just trying to fit into our family. She's new, she needs time. But deep down, I knew there was more to it. Her charm masked something sharper, something calculated, and it was slowly unraveling the family I had worked so hard to build. The breaking point came on a quiet Sunday afternoon. I had prepared a small lunch, my favorite dishes, hoping to create a warm, welcoming environment. I set the table with care, lighting candles, making everything perfect. Ryan and Alexis arrived, Alexis with her usual smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Everything seemed normal at first, polite smiles and small talk, until she casually mentioned a conversation she had had with a friend about people who overstep boundaries in their in-laws' homes. The words were casual, almost playful, but the implication was clear, and the entire room felt icy. I felt a flush of anger rising, but I swallowed it. I reminded myself, stay calm, don't escalate. Yet, The seed of confrontation had been planted. By the time dessert arrived, the atmosphere had become suffocating. Alexis made a passing remark about my outdated cooking methods, and Ryan, surprisingly, remained silent. I could feel my patience thinning, but before I could respond, Alexis looked at me with that unnerving smile and said, "Maybe it's time you learned to respect boundaries, Mom." That was it. Something snapped inside me. I wanted to speak, to defend myself, but I also realized that speaking alone wasn't enough. It required a confrontation that would either fracture the family forever or finally set things right. And then, just as I was gathering the courage to respond, Ryan, my son, stood up suddenly, eyes blazing with a mix of anger and authority I had never seen before, and shouted the words that will haunt me forever. "Apologize to my wife or get out of my house." The room went silent. Time seemed to freeze. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, feel the weight of every gaze fixed upon me. I realized then that this was more than a family disagreement. It was a test of dignity, a moment that would define who I was in the eyes of everyone I loved. And in that instant, I knew I had a choice to make. Bow down and apologize for something I didn't do, or stand my ground and risk losing my son, my home, and the family I had poured my life into. I looked around, seeing the shock on Alexis's face, the uncertainty on Ryan's, and the silent judgment of the others. I drew a deep breath, feeling a calmness settle over me that surprised even myself, and slowly, deliberately, I stood up. My posture was steady, my eyes unwavering, and I could feel the room holding its collective breath, waiting for my next move. After I stood up, a calmness washed over me that I hadn't felt in years. It was almost surreal, the way my body moved on its own, as if it had rehearsed this moment silently for decades. I could feel every eye in the room boring into me, Alexis's smirk faltering for the first time, Ryan's jaw tight with tension. The air was thick, charged with unspoken words and invisible lines that had been crossed months ago, lines I had tried to ignore, hoping things would improve. But now, the storm I had felt brewing for so long had finally hit its peak, and there was no going back. I started from the beginning, my voice steady but soft enough to draw everyone in. I reminded them of the years I had poured into this family, the sacrifices I had made, and the way I had always treated everyone with respect. I spoke of the late nights I stayed awake worrying about Ryan, the way I had tried to make his home warm, welcoming, and full of love. I told them about the subtle comments, the dismissive looks, and the times I had been made to feel invisible in my own home. I described Alexis's small manipulations, the whispers to Ryan that left me questioning my own memory and judgment. I could see the color drain from her face as I recounted these moments, not in anger, but in a quiet, undeniable clarity that left no room for denial. Ryan's face was a mixture of disbelief and anger. I could tell he was torn between the wife he loved and the mother who had raised him. But Alexis was no longer smiling. Her carefully constructed facade was cracking. She tried to interject, to twist the narrative, to make it seem as though I was imagining things or being unreasonable. But the calm conviction in my voice cut through her lies. I could see the tension in her hands, the way she gripped the edge of the table, as if holding onto some anchor that was slipping through her fingers. I remembered the nights I had cried silently in my bedroom after visiting them, feeling the sting of being belittled by someone I had welcomed into my home. I told them about those moments, the frustration, the sadness, the helplessness, but I also shared how I had tried to be patient, how I had reminded myself repeatedly to give Alexis the benefit of doubt. I wanted them to understand that I wasn't coming from a place of spite or anger. I was coming from a place of truth, a place that demanded acknowledgement for the pain I had endured silently for months. As I spoke, I noticed the subtle shifts in the room, Some family members were leaning forward, nodding slightly, their expressions reflecting shock and empathy. Others seemed frozen, caught between the tension and their loyalty to different sides of the conflict. And then there was Ryan, my son. I could see his inner struggle in the way he shifted his weight, how he avoided my gaze while keeping Alexis's hand lightly on his arm. He wanted to protect her, yes, but he was beginning to see the cracks in the story he had believed for so long. I could sense the balance of power slowly shifting. Alexis's usual confidence and control, the aura of superiority she projected, was being chipped away, piece by piece. She tried a final, desperate tactic. "Maybe she just doesn't understand the way we live now," she said, her voice trembling slightly, betraying the uncertainty she was feeling. "It's not about disrespecting anyone. It's just different priorities." But I saw right through her. The priorities she claimed were justifications, and I wasn't about to let them manipulate the truth anymore. I responded calmly, without raising my voice, pointing out specific instances where her actions had crossed the line, where boundaries had been disrespected, and where my son's own perception had been skewed by her influence. I could feel the room holding its breath, the silence stretching as every word sank in. It was one of those moments where time seems to slow, where you realize that everyone in the room is watching not just a confrontation, but a reckoning. I had hoped for understanding, yes, but I was prepared for the worst. I knew that standing up for myself meant risking estrangement from the people I loved. And yet, for the first time in months, I felt a strange sense of liberation, as though speaking the truth had lifted a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying. As I spoke, Alexis's mask finally slipped completely. Her smirk was gone, replaced by a flicker of panic. She tried to defend herself, but her words lacked conviction, falling flat in the charged atmosphere of honesty I had created. My son's expression had changed too. His anger was still there, but it was tinged with confusion and doubt. For the first time, he saw me not as the source of tension, but as a mother who had endured far more than he had realized. After I finished recounting everything, the room remained silent for several heartbeats. I could feel the weight of their judgment, but I also felt a strange sense of power. I had finally voiced the truth, laid bare the emotional manipulation, and faced the person who had tried to diminish me. I was calm, steady, and unwavering, and in that calmness there was a kind of quiet victory, because for once I wasn't shrinking. I wasn't apologizing for existing or for standing up for myself. I was reclaiming my dignity in front of everyone who mattered. Ryan broke the silence, his voice trembling slightly as he addressed Alexis. I didn't realize," he began, but then paused, clearly torn. It was the moment I had been waiting for. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the love he had for his wife clashing with the respect and bond he had with me, his mother. And though he struggled, I also saw the first flicker of understanding, the realization that perhaps I had been right all along, that my feelings, my boundaries, my dignity mattered just as much as anyone else's. It was then that I realized the story wasn't just about me and Alexis. It was about how women, mothers, and wives navigate spaces where respect is often assumed but rarely given. It was about the quiet endurance we maintain when subtle manipulation and dismissal attempt to rob us of our voice. I knew that this confrontation was only the beginning, that the real test of strength and resilience lay in what came next. And though I didn't yet know how it would end, I felt prepared to face it head on, fully aware that the choices I made now would ripple through the family forever. The silence after my words was deafening. I could feel the weight of every gaze on me, Alexis's eyes darting nervously as if she were searching for an escape, while Ryan's conflicted expression made my chest tighten with worry. I had expected anger, maybe even an outburst from my son, but what came instead was hesitation, a pause that hung in the room like thick fog. I realized then that everyone present was silently taking sides in their minds, judging not just my actions, but the very person I had been for decades. And in that moment, I understood that this wasn't just about a family dinner gone wrong. It was about respect, dignity, and the courage to stand up as a woman when the people you love are blind to manipulation. I took a slow breath, letting my words settle like stones in water, hoping they would ripple outward and create some clarity. I could feel my son's hesitation, the conflict between his love for his wife and the bond we had shared since he was a little boy. I could see him struggling internally, fighting between defending Alexis and acknowledging the truth of what I was saying. Meanwhile, Alexis fidgeted, glancing at the other family members, looking for allies, but everyone was watching, silently weighing her credibility against the reality I had painted with careful honesty. I realized that this was a pivotal moment, the point where the story could either spiral into irreparable damage or reach a long-awaited reckoning. And then I remembered all the subtle ways she had manipulated situations over the past months. The small criticisms that chipped away at my confidence, the casual but pointed remarks about my behavior, and the way she had isolated Ryan from seeing my perspective. I remembered the countless moments I had doubted myself, questioning if I was overreacting, if I had somehow caused tension that didn't belong. And yet, as I looked at Alexis now, I saw clearly what I had been avoiding. She had been deliberately undermining me, slowly rewriting the narrative to make herself untouchable and me the problem. My blood boiled not out of anger, but out of a righteous determination to reclaim my voice. It was then that I turned slightly, making eye contact with the other family members, and I could feel their attention fully shift toward me. My words became more deliberate, more powerful, as I explained the sacrifices I had made for Ryan, the years of patience and love, the nights of worry and care that had gone unnoticed. I told them about the times I had tried to bend, to compromise, to let Alexis feel welcome, and how my kindness had been met with subtle contempt. I wanted everyone to understand that this wasn't about pettiness or stubbornness. It was about standing up for the respect every woman deserves, no matter her age, her role, or her relationship. And here is where I want to pause for a moment and speak directly to you, the viewer. Think about it. If you were in my shoes, having raised your child, having devoted years of love and care, and suddenly being made to feel invisible and belittled in your own home, would you stay silent? Would you apologize for something you didn't do just to keep the peace? Or would you finally stand tall, knowing that your dignity is priceless? This is the point where I had to make a choice, where every instinct screamed to either retreat or fight. Before I go on, I want you to pause and really imagine this scenario. Comment below what you would have done in my place. Because the next part, the climax, the confrontation, the reveal of what I did changes everything. It's the moment where months of tension, manipulation, and silent endurance come to a head, and nothing is ever the same again. I want you to picture it. The room was silent except for the faint ticking of a clock somewhere in the background, a sound that seemed unnaturally loud in the tension-filled air. Alexis's face was a mask of disbelief and thinly veiled panic. Ryan's hands were clenching and unclenching at his sides, his eyes flicking between us like he was trying to balance two worlds that were colliding in front of him. Every friend, neighbor, and family member present was leaning forward, holding their breath, waiting for the next word, the next move. And I realized that in this moment, it wasn't just about a mother and a daughter-in-law. It was about women everywhere who have been silenced, dismissed, and made to feel small by subtle manipulation and control. I had always believed that calmness and composure could be my greatest weapons, that the strength of a woman's quiet confidence could cut through lies and intimidation. And now, standing there in that room, I felt that power in every fiber of my being. I could see the cracks in Alexis's poise, the way she was losing control of the narrative she had so carefully crafted. I could feel Ryan wrestling with his loyalty and his love for the woman who had raised him, as well as the shocking realization that maybe, just maybe, he had been blind to her subtle games. And that brings us to the tipping point, the moment where decisions can't be taken back. I had to decide not just what to say, but how to act, and in that decision lay the fate of my dignity, my relationship with my son, and the exposure of the manipulation that had gone unchecked for months. The next steps would either shatter the illusion or cement it permanently, and the weight of that choice pressed on me like a physical force. Every instinct in my body screamed that I couldn't retreat. I couldn't apologize for things I hadn't done. I couldn't let a woman who had tried to undermine me walk away unchallenged in my own home. And yet, I also had to be careful. Anger without strategy could destroy everything I loved. So here I was, standing taller than I had in months, feeling the room close in around me, every eye focused on me, every heartbeat synchronized with mine. I knew what I had to do, but before I tell you exactly what happened next, the confrontation that no one in that room would ever forget, I want you to think about your own boundaries. Think about the times someone has tried to manipulate, belittle, or control you, and how it felt to be forced into silence. That feeling, the frustration, the fear, the quiet rage, is exactly what I carried into that room, and it's exactly what fueled the actions I took in the next moments. Actions that would finally shift the balance and expose the truth in a way that left everyone stunned. The moment had arrived. I could feel every muscle in my body tense, but my voice remained steady, calm, and deliberate. I took a step forward, closing the invisible distance between me and Alexis, and I let my eyes lock with hers. I wanted her to understand something fundamental: the power of truth, of dignity, and of a woman who refuses to be silenced. I began recounting every single manipulation she had attempted over the months. The whispers to Ryan, the subtle digs during family gatherings, the calculated comments meant to make me question myself. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. Every word was precise, weighted with the truth, and delivered in a tone that left no room for denial. Alexis's face changed in real time. Her carefully constructed smile faded, replaced by panic, disbelief, and finally anger. She tried to interrupt, but I held up my hand, and even Ryan instinctively paused. "No," I said softly but firmly. "Let me finish." I could feel the eyes of everyone in the room fixed on us, some wide with shock, others silently cheering me on. I could see that the power she had wielded for months, the control she thought she had over Ryan and over this family, was slipping from her hands like sand. I laid out the timeline of everything she had done, describing her actions with vivid clarity. I told them how she had attempted to isolate Ryan, to make him doubt me, to make me doubt myself. I told them how her subtle criticisms were not about preferences or misunderstandings. They were tactics to assert dominance and control, to diminish my presence and make me question my worth. And as I spoke, I could see the subtle shifts in Ryan's expression, the confusion, the anger, and finally, the dawning realization that maybe he had been blind to the truth. Then I paused, letting the silence stretch and settle over the room. The tension was unbearable. Alexis's lips were pressed tightly together, her hands trembling slightly as she realized her strategy had failed. Ryan's face was pale, conflicted, and full of raw emotion. Everyone else in the room had gone quiet, the collective energy thick with anticipation. I felt a surge of calm clarity wash over me. This was the moment where I had to claim my dignity fully, and I knew exactly how to do it. I spoke directly to Ryan, my son, the man I had raised and loved fiercely, whose judgment had been clouded by blind loyalty to his wife. "Ryan," I said softly, "I have spent months enduring behavior that disrespected me, undermined our family, and tried to erase my voice. I have been patient, I have been kind, and I have been understanding. But enough is enough. You have to see the truth for yourself. This is not about anger or revenge, it's about respect. And if we are to continue as a family, that respect must exist. The room held its collective breath. Ryan swallowed hard, his eyes flicking between us, his hand lightly touching Alexis's arm, but shaking slightly. He opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again, clearly struggling with what to say. And that's when I made my move, the step that would finally tip the balance. I leaned in slightly, not aggressively, but with the calm authority of someone who had endured enough and refused to bow down. I let Alexis see the certainty in my eyes, the unwavering calm, the quiet storm of truth that could not be denied. You've pushed this family, my son, and me to the edge, I said, my voice steady. And now it's time for accountability, not apologies for imagined offenses, not manipulations disguised as concern, real acknowledgement of what's been done. I could feel the room vibrating with tension. The neighbors, friends, and family had all leaned in, sensing the magnitude of the moment. Alexis's face had gone pale, her lips slightly parted, her hands fidgeting. Ryan's jaw was tight, his fingers clenching. And then, finally, the moment of reckoning. Ryan turned to Alexis, his voice shaking but firm, and asked the question that had been unspoken for months. Is this true? Did you really manipulate situations to make Mom feel invisible? Did you deliberately try to turn me against her? Alexis opened her mouth, then faltered, caught in the weight of undeniable truth. I could see the panic rising in her eyes, the realization that her carefully constructed world was crumbling. She tried to deny, to twist, but the calm authority I had maintained throughout the confrontation made every lie transparent. And then, the most satisfying part happened. Ryan looked at me. His expression softened, regret and understanding mingling in his eyes. Mom, he said quietly, voice trembling, I didn't realize. I should have seen it sooner. I should have protected you. The room exhaled collectively, a tension broken but not without its scars. Alexis's silence was deafening. She had been exposed, and in that exposure, the power dynamics had shifted completely. I wasn't the one standing in shame anymore. She was. The aftermath was immediate. Alexis retreated, flustered and defensive, unable to maintain her composure in front of everyone. She muttered an apology, half-hearted and laced with resentment, but it felt hollow against the weight of the truth. Ryan stayed close to me, his arm brushing mine as if to reassure me, to remind me that the bond we shared had survived the storm. Family members quietly murmured their support, expressing relief and admiration for the calm strength I had shown. The tension that had hung like a cloud over the room for months finally dissipated, leaving clarity and, surprisingly, a sense of liberation. In the days that followed, the shift remained. Alexis was no longer the controlling presence she had been. She was cautious, measured, and aware that her attempts to dominate or manipulate would not go unnoticed. Ryan, my son, seemed more grounded, more attentive, and more appreciative of the family dynamics I had nurtured for years. And me, I felt lighter than I had in months. I had reclaimed my voice, my dignity, and my place in the family, not through anger, but through calm, deliberate strength and unwavering truth. Looking back, I realized that the confrontation wasn't just about one woman, one daughter, in-law, or even one family. It was about standing up for yourself, about refusing to allow manipulation or disrespect to go unchallenged, and about teaching those around you, especially the next generation, that dignity and truth cannot be silenced. I had faced a storm that threatened to erode everything I had built, and I had emerged not only intact but stronger, wiser, and more confident in my ability to protect my voice and my worth. As the days passed after that intense confrontation, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened. The months of subtle manipulation, the nights of doubt, the moments when I questioned my own worth, and finally, the courage it took to stand up and speak my truth. It wasn't easy. It took every ounce of patience, every bit of composure, and the belief that a woman's dignity is never something to compromise. But standing my ground had shown me something profound. Strength isn't always loud or explosive. Sometimes it's calm, steady, and deliberate, and when wielded with truth, it becomes unstoppable. I think the most powerful part of all of this wasn't the confrontation itself. It was the aftermath. Seeing my son, Ryan, recognize what had been happening, apologize for his blind loyalty, and reaffirm his love and respect for me was more than I could have asked for. Witnessing Alexis's carefully crafted facade crumble, realizing that manipulation and subtle control can only last so long when met with unwavering truth, was almost cathartic. I felt lighter, freer, and more confident than I had in months. I realized that no one, no daughter-in-law, no spouse, no relative, has the right to diminish a woman's voice or her place in her family. And that realization, that empowerment, is something I want every woman watching this story to feel. To all the women out there who may have been made to feel invisible or belittled in your own homes, in your workplaces, or in your relationships, never underestimate the power of standing up for yourself. Speak calmly, clearly, and with conviction. Your voice matters, your dignity matters, and the people who truly care about you will see and respect your strength. The experience left me wiser, stronger, and more committed than ever to protecting not just my own dignity, but the principle that every woman deserves respect and recognition in the spaces she occupies. So, if you were on my side as I faced that impossible situation, if you felt the tension, the fear, and the ultimate triumph along with me, then like this video, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, someone who may be struggling to find their voice in the face of manipulation or disrespect. Comment below and share your final thoughts on this whole mess. Tell me what you would have done if you were in my shoes, and let's start a conversation about standing strong, no matter the odds. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this, because there are so many untold tales out there. Stories of courage, dignity, and the quiet power of standing your ground. I'll see you all in the next story. And remember, no matter how small or subtle the challenges may seem, your voice, your strength, and your dignity are worth every single moment of courage it takes to protect them.